Hello, I'm Rick Stivers. I'd like to welcome you to Young Martin's Reels. And today's project is going to be this Martin Miracle-Matic 500. And if I told you that I was taking this apart for the first time, I'd be a liar. I have already been into this reel once tonight, and it took me a while to figure out what was going on with it. And I'm still not absolutely positive that I have. If I am correct, then what I'm looking at here is a reel that works totally different from any other reel that I've ever encountered. It now winds. The button pushes in, but when the button pushes in, the rotor does not stay up. But I can't find any mechanism in it whatsoever that would cause the rotor to stay up. Let's go ahead and take it apart, and let's see what we can find. And if I can get it apart. Okay. There's a locking screw at the top, but I've already got that loose. And you rotate it counterclockwise, very small amount, and then it slides up. Okay, like that. Okay, here's our rotor, and if you look, the rotor does not stay up. And normally, like in the Shakespeare's, there's a little spring wire inside that is supposed to, you have to adjust it to get it to work right. But there is no brake on the top of this that I can find, no sign of any kind of brake. And when you take the rotor off, there's nothing inside like there is on many other reels that causes it to skip and drop down. If you look, it just falls back down, and I've not been able to find anything in here. See, with a Shakespeare reel, a lot of the Shakespeare reels anyway, there's a wire that fits into this groove here, and that groove cuts into this post, and it catches. But there's nothing that I've been able to find inside this one that allows that to happen. But there is also a spring in here I haven't deduced the reason for. So let's see what we can do. Let's go ahead and pop this off. Okay, there's our E-clip off, and now with that off, our spool will slide out and off. There we go. And now this assembly here will not come off without taking out these two screws right here. But before we can do that, we've got to take off this drag knob. Okay, let's go ahead and remove this screw, or at least unscrew it. It doesn't typically like to come out of there, so just loosen it all the way up and unscrew the drag knob. Then in here you've got a little cup washer, and inside that cup washer there are two tension washers that are set in there opposed to each other that supply tension for the drag. With that done, we can now slide the handle out, and we can slide this collar off. Okay, with those off, now it's time to come back and take out these two screws. Okay, with those out now, we should be able to lift this out, rotate it around, and it takes a little bit of finesse and a little bit of wiggling. Don't force it. You just have to kind of find the right position for it to sit in, and out that comes. All right, now, one of the things I want to point out here is that there is this spring right here. And for the life of me, I can't find a purpose behind this spring. It doesn't react in any way to anything. The button doesn't come anywhere near it. The button is way out here. So at this time, I'm trying to figure out a purpose behind this spring. And it is removable. So far I haven't come up with anything for it. Okay, now this whole assembly now is very loose in here, and that's because we took this handle off. But if you slip the handle back in, big if, you will see that everything will line back up. Or it should. There we go, like so. Now everything's lined back up again properly, And this would be turning if we had the drag knob tightened down on here, okay? But now this is a total, let's go ahead and reinstall that drag. And so you can see what happens when all of this is operating properly. As that tightens down, it squeezes the drag washers right here. And now all that rotates. But look at this main gear that's in this thing. It is actually a stamped steel gear. Very, very coarse, and it has a very rough feel to it. Okay? It's just the way it's built. So that's one of my least favorite things about this entire reel, is the roughness of this. All right, now, if you look, here's our button that when we push our button in right here, okay, that pushes forward and pushes this axle shaft forward. Well, when the axle shaft goes forward like so, oh, wait a minute. Now that held in place. What's going on here? All right. Is it possible that the button hasn't been pushing this far enough forward to lock? Or did I just manage to get it jammed? Okay. Oh, that's just jamming that washer on this center right here. Surely that's not what would push that forward to make that lock. I do not believe for the life of me that that jamming on the gear is supposed to be what holds it in place. But I'm going to come back and look at this. Maybe I haven't been pushing it forward enough. Let's find out. Okay, with that done, we are now going to remove this E-clip off of here. And what we'll do is we'll slide this down like so. And we'll slide this side down. Okay, that down, we can move this collar down, and now we can pop this E-clip off of here. Like so. Okay, with the E-clip off, I can release this now, take the spring off, and now this axle shaft will slide out the front, and that will allow the pinion gear and this spacer right here to come off. And I was hoping that this spacer here had something to do with it locking, but I can't find anything that allows that to happen. Okay, I still don't know what causes this thing to work. With that done, we'll slide this main gear assembly out. And that gives us our anti-reverse assembly right here with the spring. We've got a drag washer here, a metal drag washer here and another phenolic drag washer on the inside of this. This piece comes apart by popping this E-clip off of here. Now, with that done, the metal drag washer will come off. The phenolic drag washer will come off. And on the back side, this other drag washer comes off. And that's got all of that apart. So that completely disassembles the reel, and still I have no... Ladies and gentlemen, I just figured it out. You know how sometimes somebody else has been into a reel before you got there, and they took something apart, and then you can't figure out what in the world it was that they did? Well, here it is. This spring right here, I believe, is the cause of the grief. Someone has been in here and they took this spring off and they put it on backwards. I believe that this spring is intended to be installed over the axle assembly, or around the axle assembly. That explains why I couldn't figure out how or what it was supposed to do. There we go. Now, see how that spring falls on each side of the axle? Now, when this slides in, this piece will be sitting here. This axle assembly slides into here and will come up through here like so. See how that catches right there? I believe that that is going to be a player. Now, I got to figure out if that spring's going to fit on which side of that shaft. Does this go inside or does it stay on the outside? That's what I had to figure out. It has to stay on the outside. Okay. So let's see if we can figure this out now. The axle shaft in. These two pieces go in here, like so. I will say that this has been one of my more difficult encounters. All right, we've got that on. Well, before we do that, let's go ahead and put the main gear assembly back together. I know that you just watched me take this all apart, and now here you are looking at it all back together again. And the problem is this thing has been put together and taken apart about 10 times now. And I think I have finally figured out what's wrong with it. And I'm going to take it back apart again now, and the right way, and show you what I believe the problem is. Actually, it's several of them, and we'll see if we can't get them all taken care of in this one. Okay. And I will do the best I can to explain to you what it is, what's going on. I believe that the spring that is in here is not the correct spring. I have a feeling what happened was the original spring broke and somebody tried to replace it with another spring. Didn't quite know what kind of spring to put in there or where it came from, and they put it in incorrectly. Put an incorrect spring in, put it in the wrong place, and I've been suffering with what's going on ever since then. Okay, so that's got the cover off, and that brings us down to this point right here. Okay, now this spring that's in here is, I don't believe, the right spring, and I'm going to make a new spring. First off, I think this spring is too thick and too strong. When the spring is in there, it holds the gear up just a little bit too far, and it causes an interference fit down here with the main gear. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to measure that spring, and I'm going to take it out of there, and I'm going to make a new spring to go in here, and I'm going to make it so that it fits this properly and does what I believe it's supposed to do. So we'll see how that goes first. But the first thing we've got to do is take this C-clip out, or E-clip, and I'm going to push this down right here. These two parts, and now look at the spring. If you look at it here, I've even bent it a few times trying to make it do what I thought it was supposed to do, and none of that seems to be working. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to make a whole new spring to go in there. Okay, let's go ahead and take this out, because that is not the problem. Everything that is a problem, or almost everything that is a problem with this spring, or with this reel, is resulting from this spring right here. All right. Now, this spring, what I believe it's supposed to do, if you look at the end of this, let me wipe it off so you can see better. All right, if you look at the end of this, see we've got this channel right here? And I believe that channel is what the spring is supposed to be riding in. Okay, right there. And once it comes around to one side, it's supposed to lift the spring out and allow it to slide down the cylinder. And but it's only supposed to be doing it on one side. And this spring, if you remember originally, before I bent it around, it was a little less rounded, a little more straight on the sides. What I'm going to do, I'm going to make a brand new spring for this that is a little bit smaller in diameter and forms more of a P kind of shape, actually more of an R shape. It's going to come down, come around, but it's going to loop out and around so that it's not catching on this side over here of the shaft, and then it's going to come in and then back out over here, and I'm hoping that we can make that work. So we'll see in just a few minutes how that's going to work for us. Okay, originally the original video for this was going to be a fail video, but in the end I have managed to get this reel fixed. It's still a grinder, and that's because of the tooth design of that main gear. But we're going to take this thing and we're going to pull it back apart real quick, and I'm going to show you what I found in it, what I did, all the different attempts I made to try to fix it, and what I eventually did do to make it work. Okay, so we're going to start off by taking off the cover. All right, and as you can see now, when I hit the button, the rotor goes up and it stays up until you wind it, and then it drops back down. Rotor goes up, wind it, and it drops back down. Every time. Okay? And it's smooth as can be, except that gear grind. Now, next thing we're going to do is we're going to pop off. Well, let's see. Do we want to do that? No, we're going to leave this on for a moment, because we can leave that on and still take this apart. Okay? Next thing we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and take off this handle, because I want to show you how the spring for the axle shaft actually works. And I'll show you the spring that I made for it. Before we get to that, let's take a look at the springs that I made for the axle shaft in attempts to get it to work right. This was the original spring that was in it. The rest of these were all different attempts I made trying to get it to sit in the right position. And I finally made a spring that sits in the right position, and it does everything it's supposed to do to make it work. Okay, so let's take a look at how it works now. Let's go ahead. We're going to take this screw out because it makes it easier. It doesn't hold anything in, but it makes it less binding as you're trying to take the cover out. Okay, we're going to take this screw off. We're going to take this screw out. And then we're going to lift this out, and you got to kind of wiggle it to make it all happen. There we go. It's got the case off. And now, watch this spring right here. We're going to put, let me put this handle back on and tighten down the drag so that it's operational. Okay. There we go. Now it winds. All right, now if you watch that spring right there as we push in the axle shaft. Okay, it goes in to the point where it locks out right here. Watch it right here. It's come back down and it's sitting in position. It's in the lockout position right now. Now watch as I wind it. The axle shaft's going to push it back out to where it needs to be, and it drops back into place. Now we've got it down, and that's how it works. Okay, push the button again. There it goes. It locks out. Down here, I'm going to try to do that without having my hand slip so you can see it. Okay, it drops into position. What happens is it slides into that little groove that okay, and then as it rotates, it pushes it out, and that allows the axle to slide back to where it belongs. Okay, now we're gonna go ahead and take this all the way apart. We're gonna clean it and assemble it, and you're gonna see how it all goes together, and you will get a chance. So see the modified spring, the custom spring that I made for it, which is probably very, very close to the way the original spring that was in it was made. Okay. And I have found when taking this off that this little pair of diagonal cutters works really good for grabbing it, as long as you don't grab it so hard that you cut it. Okay. We're going to take the C-clip out. We're going to take the spring off. We're going to slide the axle out of the front. Okay. There's our sleeve, our cup holder the axle fits into. There is the gear. And now we're going to slide the main gear assembly out. And now there is the spring that I made. Okay, as a matter of fact, I'm going to set it down low, and we are going to use the zoom in feature to get in there close to it so you can see it. And I had to get this just exactly right so that it wasn't on the axle here, so it wouldn't fall back into the groove, and yet it rides in the groove, but then as it goes around, as it gets into this groove right here, that groove pushes it out and pops it over. Now, as soon as you push it out, it comes up, it drops onto here, and then it starts to rotate around again, and that pushes it out again. Okay? That's how this works. Let's go ahead and take this the rest of the way apart so that you can see everything, how it goes back together. And I'm going to clean it up. And most of this reel seems to be made out of aluminum, which makes me wonder if they didn't have like a I know Langley started out making aluminum stuff, and this is a steel gear, and it's a stamped steel gear. So I think they were trying new technologies out, and I'm not real impressed with a stamped steel gear. I know they were, you know, they made a lot of this kind of thing in toys and stuff, but I've never seen it in a fishing reel before. Okay, pull this out. There's our anti-reverse. All right. Now, I greased this because things weren't working too well. So I wanted things to try to ride as smoothly as possible. Well, in greasing it, I think what I've done is I've made it awful tight. So I'm going to go through and clean the grease back out of everything and oil all the parts that I normally oil and see if we can't get this thing running as smooth as can be. Oh, also another thing that I did is I added these 2 shims in because even with the right gear in, oh, by the way, let's go ahead and unscrew that. If you've forgotten how this came apart, it is in the at the beginning of this video as to how all this normally comes apart. And we will directly reverse all those procedures for putting it back together. The only grease that I intend to have in here is on the 2 gears. All the rest of this I plan to oil. All right? So let me wipe it down and I'll be right back to you. At this point, we're ready to start reassembling. We're going to start off with the crankshaft. That's this square shaft right here. And onto that, we are going to install this Teflon, or phenolic drag washer. Onto that goes the main gear. Onto that goes another drag washer. And finally, there goes the keyed washer. And the last part for this assembly is going to be this E-clip. Okay, we snap that into place and that's ready to go. The next part that's going to go onto that is going to be this anti-reverse gear. Okay, we're going to zoom in just a little bit. Okay, the anti-reverse gear is going to slide onto here and has to go on the right way. And I'm putting it on the, no, that's the right way. No, I'm looking at it upside down. Okay. All right, the next part's going to go is this anti-reverse gear. And what was messing me up is I was looking at it upside down. It goes on, but then when it goes back on like this, it's going to be like this. And I knew that this was supposed to look like this coming across and not like that. Well, it's because I'm looking at it from the opposite direction. Okay. This part now drops into here. Now, when it does, you see this post right? This is your anti-reverse claw right here, or paw, whichever one you want to call it. And this little loop right here has to fit over the top of the long one there. Okay, so we're going to set this in here. We're going to set that down over top of that loop. And that is what makes your anti-reverse work. Okay, now all this is going to fit really loose in here. And if you want to tighten it up a little bit so that it holds in place, what you can do is go ahead for the temporary and stick your handle on like that, and that'll tighten things up a little bit. You still won't be able to turn it with the handle, but it'll be less likely for it to fall apart and have that loop fall back off. So let's put that there, wind it around a little bit to hold it up, and see, I just let it fall off. Okay, let's try to put it back into place. Let's take that back out and let's reset that. I was showing off too much. There we go. Set it into place and then set your handle back in. Okay, we're going to set that down like so, and we're ready to reinstall this axle. Now, on this axle, what we're going to use is oil. And I've been greasing it, but it's really slowed the reel down a lot to try to grease it. So I've decided that we're going to oil it. So we're going to slide this in. And just about the time it starts to drop into the hole is where we want to stop and put this cup on. The cup goes facing down. Okay, like so. And it's going to give me a fit here. Okay, let's try this again. Set the cup in facing down, like so. Next goes the gear. Gear goes on, and then we're going to slide this up. I got to get the axle shaft to rotate around until it goes through like that. Okay, and now if you look, I've still managed to let this thing slip a little bit. And by doing so, it allowed that loop to come off. So we're going to bring it back around one more time, except this time we don't have all that play to move it around. So let's go ahead and sit that back into place on that post, like so. All right, with that sitting in place, leave the axle shaft facing down against the table, and let's bring this spring over. We're going to take and move the spring down, like so, and then I'm going to take my hemostats. Now you can fight and battle that if you wish, but I have hemostats and I intend to use them. If you don't have them, then you've got a much more difficult task ahead of you, getting this all to hold into place while you put this E-clip on. By the way, I think I bought like 12 pairs of hemostats on Amazon for like $10. So they're reasonably inexpensive. Okay, we're up to that point. We've got that snap back in place, and now there's that spring again. Okay, we're going to come back and put this in now, and it has to slide into this housing. So let's go ahead and slide it into the housing, like so. Once you've done that, you can slide this collar back on. Once you've done that, you can come back and oil the crankshaft arm for the handle. There we go. And on now we'll go well, there is a tension washer inside here that's upside down, and it's the way it's supposed to be. We're going to set that in place with the cup facing up towards the drag. Now we're going to set this other one on like so, and we're going to follow that up with the drag knob. Spin that on. Okay, now we're ready to start seeing if some of this is working. Okay, and you're gonna have a bit of a gear grind at the moment. What did I forget? I'll tell you what I forgot. Chris tells me all the time that I need to grease my pinion gears when I put them in, and I didn't do it. And at this point, it's too late to do it without having to take it back apart. So let me take it apart. All right. Wow, that was fun. Make sure that we're still on right there. Now, I did not grease the pinion gear. And normally I also grease this main gear, but let me tell you what I'm not going to do this time. I'm not going to grease that main gear because there's going to be enough grease on the pinion gear to grease it. And what I don't want to happen is I don't want the grease to get all over the drag washers. So if I put the grease just on the pinion gear and just on this axle shaft, I should be able to rotate this around and have that grease come off of the pinion gear onto the axle shaft here and onto the main gear without getting it down onto the drag washers. Okay, there we go, slides back together. At this point, we're going to go ahead, slide this sleeve back on, slide the handle back in. There we go. Slide on the cup with the two tension washers. Screw on the drag washer, or the drag knob. Okay, there we go. Now we're going to put these 2 screws back in. And I find these are a little difficult sometimes to align, so I'm going to get them straight to begin with. And make sure that everything lines up properly. And I'm not going to tighten these all the way down. What I have found, if you do, then when you go to put the cover on, it doesn't want to come in to play. So okay, I'll probably end up even loosening those up a little bit when I go to put them in. And as a matter of fact, you have to kind of loosen them up a little bit just to get this screw to line back up for the cover. Okay, there we go. Got it started. That's good. Let's slide the spool back on. Now remember that spool's got this indent right here. It's going to lock in right there. Okay, so when you put that on, rotate it around until it snaps into place like that. Just like that. And we are going to go in and put on the E-clip. There we go. And what I did to make this thing ride smoother is I went in and added 2 shim washers. Because what was happening was this was dropping down to the point, see right there? It drops down so far, even with the spool on it, that it still wants to bind into the gear. So what I found is it seems to work better if you slightly shim the axle shaft forward on this particular one anyway. I'm not saying they're all like that. I'm saying this particular one was able to benefit from having a shim kit put in. All right. Let's tighten down that screw. Now there's a screw that we haven't put back in. That's this one on the drag knob. Let's go ahead and set it into place and tighten it down. Okay. All right, that looks good. Let's see if we can get a hold of the line that's in there. Let's run the line through the cap. And I had hold of it. Okay, square cutout goes on the bottom. Line it up. And what you may find is it doesn't want to go on. Okay, if that's the case, let's back this out now. Go ahead, loosen these up ever so gently. And that allows that to wiggle around and go in. And now, tighten them gently and see if you've got it on right. Pretty good. Okay. There we go. Make sure to rotate it that little 2 or 3 degrees. Bring that down, and let's see what we have. Let's loosen the drag. Okay, we got practically no drag there. Okay, still got drag. More drag. Yeah, it doesn't take much to lock it down. There we go. And let's see if we have free spool. We have free spool, and it winds in. But like I said, the gear design in this thing makes it really noisy, but it works beautifully. It's doing everything it's supposed to do. And I have gone from absolutely hating this reel earlier today to suddenly having a bit of admiration for it. Now that I've got a spring that's proper. I don't know if this was an original spring that was in it. Whatever reason, it would not engage. So we've replaced this one with the one that I used. And there you have it, folks. The Martin Miracle-Matic 500. I hope you liked the video. If you did, please hit the like button. If you didn't like it, hit the dislike button. I do have a bonus footage today. What I'm going to do, this thing was put together over and over and over, taken it apart, just all kinds of stuff going on. Hours and hours worth of footage was invested into this reel. And what I'm going to do, rather than waste all that effort and go through all that editing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to jump all of that video on at the tail end of this, and I'm going to run it forward at 50 speed fast forward so that you can see just exactly what all I went through to get this reel done. So if you, I'm hoping you guys do well. I did go over 1,000 subscribers this weekend. A fellow by the name of Steve Guest was my 1,000th viewer. And from now on, I don't get to get numbers like that. From now on, it just says 1K. And so I'm assuming as people are added, I don't get individual numbers anymore. I'll just get 1K, 2K, 3K, that kind of thing. We'll just see how things go. And for now, that's Rick Stivers with the Young Martin's Reels, signing out.